Welcome to Orn Oth's Bedtime Stories. Tonight's story, The Foggy Day, written by Orn Oth the Dragon and read by Orn Oth the Dragon. In a cave far above a forest where snow is always present, on a small pile of modern coins, slept a small silver dragon. His name was Orn Oth, and today something woke him early. Orn Oth was used to the air being quite dry as it was always cold, but today the air was moist. This could only mean one thing. "Ground clouds!" Orn Oth shouted in delight. Orn Oth dashed outside to see a thick blanket of fog covering everything. The fog was so thick that he could only just make out the shape of the nearest tree. Orn Oth giggled at this and pranced around in a circle celebrating his good fortune. Orn Oth loved the fog. As a baby silver dragon, he had the magical ability to walk on and shape clouds. He had found that this ability also worked on fog. It was like playing in cotton candy, but since it was made up of water droplets, he could also drink it and stay hydrated. The first thing that Orn Oth did was to climb up in the fog to the top. There he could see the fog swirling and wisps frothing up here and there, almost like flames from a fire as the sun started to peek over the horizon. Orn Oth set right to work pouncing on these wisps and working them back into the fog. If he took care of the top first and made it more solid, then the fog would stay for longer, maybe even all day. So the little dragon hopped and pounced and chased down all the little wisps that started to let the fog dissipate, so that it would stay on the ground. Next, he started to make little fog burrows and whirlpools. Orn Oth loved making the fog do cool things like warp images and swirl in eddies and change it so that it was thicker in some areas and thinner in others. Many of the animals that lived high up in the mountain also liked this, as thicker patches allowed them to hide easily. Giggling and squeaking with joy, Orn Oth then set to work making a little castle. It was a lot like a sand castle, but made out of fog instead. Orn Oth wanted to try to make his castle as big and fluffy as he could. Someday he hoped to join in on the contest that the other silver dragons had, where they turned whole clouds into different shapes, like fish or bunnies or cars. He had watched these clouds roll overhead, and had often enjoyed trying to figure out what each cloud was supposed to be from the ground. He would sometimes lay on his back for hours, just watching the clouds and dreaming about making them into fun shapes like that. So he worked and worked on his little cloud castle, making it both detailed and simple. Hours passed, and he worked until suddenly he noticed that the rest of the fog was beginning to disappear. "Oh no, my castle is going to melt," Orn Oth cried. This always seemed to happen. Every time the fog came in, it would eventually disappear, as would anything Orn Oth was trying to make. But this time, Orn Oth decided to try something he had never done before. He wove his cloud this way and that, rearranging the droplets to strengthen them, and that is when he made a discovery. Orn Oth was able to make the gas of the cloud act like it was a solid. Orn Oth could not believe it. He tried tapping the side of the cloud castle with his tail to see what would happen. Instead of poofing into a swirl of mist like he expected, the castle simply started floating in the direction that he had pushed it. Orn Oth's eyes widened at this. He realized that he had a little cloud castle that he might be able to keep. He wondered what he could do with this little castle. Could it do more than just float around? Orn Oth looked around. "I need to test this," he said to himself. Orn Oth flew quickly over to a tree and gathered a few pine needles and a pine cone. But when he tried to fly back to the cloud castle, the wind from his wings pushed it away from him. Orn Oth flew faster, trying to catch the cloud castle, but it only moved away from him more quickly. It took him a few minutes of chasing it around before he realized that he needed to land and walk to it so as not to push it away. Once he had reached the castle, Orn Oth lifted his front claw to drop a piece of the needles and see what would happen. Just before he could drop them, though, a small breeze picked up, and the little cloud castle wandered away from him once more. "No, Cloud! You come back here and let me test you!" Orn Oth called after the cloud. This was getting frustrating. Almost all the fog was gone except for his little cloud castle, and it kept trying to wander off any time the slightest breath of wind pushed at it. That is when Orn Oth got an idea. He waddled up to the castle and flapped his little wings at it. The castle, of course, moved away from his wing beats, so Orn Oth used this to his advantage, guiding the castle up to his cave where the air was still. Once inside, Orn Oth was able to drop the pine needles into the castle. Instead of falling through, though, they landed in the courtyard and stayed there. Next, Orn Oth tried to put in the pine cone. He was sure that this would be much too heavy for the cloud castle to hold, but to his surprise, it held the pine cone easily. He then spent the rest of the day trying out all kinds of things to see what his creation would hold. He put in dirt, and rocks, and snow, and even caught a squirrel and put it in. The castle made of clouds held them all, but the squirrel didn't think it was a good place to stay and leapt out as soon as it got the chance and scampered off. But as the sun went down, Orn Oth found his favorite things to put into his little cloud castle. He put his little glow-in-the-dark fish toy named Finnegan. "Ooh, cool! It made the whole thing glow," Orn Oth discovered. But Orn Oth's favorite thing to put in his castle by far was himself. It was so soft and so comfortable that Orn Oth fell asleep, his tiny tail wrapped around him, and his little glowing fishy sitting on his head. Orn Oth snored as he dreamed of growing up to live in the clouds and float on pillows in the sky. The end.